everybody, my name is Suke. Welcome to Lead Guitar Workshop. I want to talk about a little bit of how to solo with triads. What I was doing there. Just a G chord and the G, 3 notes of the G chord. That's all it was, really. And let's talk about how to understand that, how to look at that, and some ideas about how to embellish that. The first thing is recognizing the shapes of a chord. When you play with the triad, what that means is you're playing with the 3 notes of the chord. So let's just talk one chord right now, just G. There's always 3 of a triad. There's only 3 notes in the chord, so there's 3 iterations of themselves. Those are called inversions. There's a video you can check out linked here for a deeper dive into getting the shapes, but let me just quickly show you how I look at it. When I'm thinking a G chord, I have the G bar chord. Right, this is the E form, and this is based off the low E string. So there's one of the shapes. These fall into the caged system. There's 3 of them. There's the E shape. Then we're going to look at the A string for the other G. This is on the 10th fret. And this is going to give us the other 2 forms. The form we immediately know is the A form. But also from that same G note, we think of the C form. And the idea is not, again, the full chords right now, but let's say if we removed the thickest 3 strings and we were left with the top 3, the E, the B, and the G strings. So when we take those subsets of those inversion shapes from the bar chords, the first one is this guy. The second one actually looks like a D chord. It's to me, the C and the D form really are one and almost the same. But it's coming from this master C form shape, but we're looking at this guy here. And then from the A chord, it's a little hidden sometimes, but it's 12, 12, and 10. So you first want to just get comfortable moving them as chords. They're great for rhythm guitar, for sections of songs, for riffs. We see these inversions all the time in songs. We're going to use them for solos. So when you play solo, when you use triads for solos, you want to really think of them as 3-note scales. Right? You kind of start, well, if you have a G chord, what's your least common denominator? Well, 1 note, the G. Cool. What's the next option? Well, playing all 3 notes of the chord, the triad. From there, you would add 2 more notes to make it a pentatonic. You would add 2 more notes to that to make it your 7-note scales. And then with passing tones and blue notes, you pretty much start hitting all 12 tones anyways. So let's take a look at how we would separate the shapes. It's important, so many of my students do this. Don't hold the grip. We're not arpeggiating. Great idea, but that's not what we're looking for. If anything, do this with 1 finger. Just trace it. Just trace the shape. And make sure you're owning each note. Don't just graze over them. The second shape. And the third shape. And you hear musically that stacking sound as you're going up. Now, as a lead guitar player, you have to be aware that this stuff is still happening for 2 or 3 more times of the shapes are reoccurring up here again. So way up in the first, 3rd fret position up on the 15th fret here, we get the D chord and one of the notes, if you're on a 22 fret guitar, from the A form. So if we connected those, you have to get used to kind of opening your peripheral vision a little bit and thinking 1 note at a time. Then start over. That takes a long time, right? That takes a long time to get used to. You could practice them in context. So if you take a G chord, strum it for say 2 beats. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. Try the next shape. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then finally the A form. Now, one of the things also is when you play these chords, when you play triads, some people kind of lump it into the arpeggiating, like a verb thing. Like it has to be repeated. And it totally does not. These are just 3 notes that work great with the chord. So you can play them on single strings. That's all 3 of the notes too, right? You do it on the B string, just look for the shapes you traced earlier. And on the G string. Now, if you can get creative, you can start mixing those up. One way I like to do is I zigzag them. So I'll go up 1, come down the second one, and up the third one. And again, you can use different fingerings as long as the notes don't overlap unintentionally. You don't want this. That's a different sound. You want to think of it like if you were singing, right? You can only make one sound at a time when you're thinking this way. So once you start zigzagging them, you would do that in time, of course, as you're jamming with yourself. You can slide between different chunks. Right, just the first 2 patterns. Really is nice to, it's a very musical slide. Very simple stuff, but man, it goes a long way because it's very musical. You have to get used to, again, opening your peripheral vision to see these shapes. Now let's take it a couple steps further. What can you do with this triad a little more? You can start adding notes if you're aware of the intervals. So in each chord, there's a root, a third, and a fifth. And whenever you're learning these numbers, remember it all relates to sound, not just data, not just places in line like a line check. You're just, so over the G chord, the G root just disappears. It's very, has a lot of consonants, very relaxed. The third, has a lift but some warmth to it. The fifth of a chord to me has like a flexing your muscles, the strongest of the 3. And musicians kind of feel their way through this and think about this stuff when they're building melodies. So I do a third. That's the root there. I can do the fifth. See, it's very proud. The fifth is very proud. Stands up nice and tall, right? So once you know where they are in each shape, it takes a little bit, but if you think of the shapes you know in an E form bar chord that this middle finger is the toggle switch that would go down to minor. So that's where the third is. Fifth and root. On the D form, the fifth is on the G string. Now the root's on the middle, on the B string, and the third is on top. On this A form up here, the root is on the 3rd string, third is on the 2nd string, ooh, that's a lot, and the 5th is on top. Each note will be on one of the 3 strings respectively. So it's a lot of process of elimination. Once you know it, it's the same forever for all major chords in this case, looking at that. So what do we do with that? Well, like for instance, David Gilmour liked to add the sus4, adding a half step above the 3rd. It elicits a really nice sound, the same as it does as a chord. You can hear that. I actually have another video on David Gilmour on that specific technique you can check out. But even if you just play it like you hear that all the time in music. This is how you would also start thinking about adding sevenths. Now a seventh we think is root, 3, 5th, 7th. We think it's far away from the root, but don't forget it's right behind the next root. So if you know a little bit of theory, this stuff helps immensely. Like major 7th chords, the 7th is a half step behind the root. So if I can see these 3 triads on top here, there's the G, there's my root, there's the major 7. So if I was playing over a G major 7, right there. All the shapes you can see. Here's the G up here. If it was a blues and this was a G7, then you'd put it a whole step behind the root. Now I can go behind it on the same string. I could add it on the B string above it if I see that note as a whole step on the previous string. There was coming the flat 7. You heard me hit a blue note. That was the next thing you can do. When you know as a musician that the third is the toggle switch in music, that's the major minor note. When you're playing in blues, one of the blue notes, we think the flat 5, but honestly in the major world, it's actually the flat third going up to the major third of a chord. So if I play a G, I see my inversion. There's the third right there, root and fifth, a fifth and root, excuse me. And a lot of us have done this just unintentionally almost. Dipping. So if I see the third anywhere, I know as a musician that's going to elicit that sound. I can bend into it. I'm just thinking this inversion of G. I could see it up here. So you start adding these together and you're going to end up getting your 7-note plus scales anyways. It's just almost a cleaner way to approach music is go right at the chord and kind of build it out from there. This can be a very involved process. As you can see, we're just doing one chord on one set of strings. This happens on the D, G, and B, really any 3 sets of strings. You can start thinking all this and it really makes one chord go to the moon and back with the information. But you can see how it kind of prioritizes the notes as well. When you learn 7-note scales, some people just kind of run up and down the stairs and they're not thinking about what it's doing, and that's why it never quite sounds right. But if you go after the chord and you know the intervals in there, you can start to really get the sounds you're looking for and keep track of the ones you like when you hear it. One last advanced idea is adding another chord or more than other chords on top of one chord. So if you're playing the G chord, you can play your G Triad. Right, you can do different stuff with that. But let's say we added the next chord in the key for whatever purpose we're in. Like the next thing would be an A chord. You could do let's do A minor. That's in a couple of keys, G and C. So if you find a minor inversion, I don't want to spend too much time doing this, but you can see there's a A minor process, same idea. Your A minor is now flat. You can take the same 3 shapes we did. What would have been a D shape up here is actually going to look like a D minor shape. That's the A minor. And then the A form up here is not going to be a straight one, but a staircase for the A minor shape. That's the same as your open A minor down here. So for A minor, I mean, this is the same information that like Yngwie Malmsteen is like ripping across up and down the neck. But what we're going to use is just a little more subtle way than what Yngwie might do with it. So you could, for instance, to jump ahead a little bit, if you zigzagged not only the G, but you can try with the A minor. And now, if you alternate between them, A minor, G major, A minor, G major, A minor, G major. You can start using this stuff in really different ways. If you summed it together, that's 6 out of the 7 notes in a scale. People, jazz players, rock players, they'll superimpose different triads on top of stuff to elicit different sounds. The first step is just getting the chord number 1 in the door. I would recommend with my students is G, C, D, E minor, and A minor. Those are like the top 5 chords in songs, especially as guitar players. We learn them first. It's a great place to get to know them musically by their notes, by their inversions. Remember that all this is in the same. Once you learn this stuff, it never moves. That's the really cool thing about music. when you start studying it and understanding it, how small the language really is. All right, again, my name is Suke. This is Lead Guitar Workshop. If you like what you hear, and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. In the link below, please sign up on our mailing list. We often have free giveaways for you to do that, and we're going to be having a lot of new stuff coming up in 2025 at Lead Guitar Workshop, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So get on that list, get the information. I give it all my email list. People get stuff first before I send it out to the public. So make sure you get on there to know what's happening. And everything else out there, of course, just keep playing, guys.